Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I am your host. Welcome to episode 28. It is currently November 27th, 2024, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to anyone who has that coming up, or if you already celebrated. Hope it went well. Hope you had a lot of good, nummy food, and hopefully your fantasy team scored a lot of points. In this episode, we are going to be going over my week 13 starts of the week. Before we get into that, though, please make sure that you are following or that you are subscribed so that you can stay tuned for more fantasy football content and, more importantly, become a fantasy football prodigy. If you want the video for the podcast and you want to see my lovely face, you can just look up Fantasy Football Prodigy on YouTube and look for the weird looking guy, probably a thumbnail with a bunch of NFL players in it who, you know, when I say a player is going to do well, they always do well. I'm never wrong. Oh, God. Anyways, we've been better on our calls lately, I think. So make sure to follow or subscribe. Drop a like if you can where you're at. And let's hop right into the starts of the week at quarterback. So this week, I only have one start of the week for each position. There was really one guy in each spot that I really wanted to highlight. Plus, I have travel plans and I don't have a lot of time to yap about every player. So we're going to start at quarterback with Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road against the Carolina Panthers. This game has a 46.5 point over-under. It's a great matchup against the Panthers defense, who have given up production to quarterbacks all season long, allowing the sixth most points per game to quarterbacks on the year. On top of that, the Panthers offense has shockingly looked a lot better since Bryce Young came back from his benching. When a team is all around terrible, you run the risk of opposing offenses just running the ball all game long and not needing to throw at all to get the win. But we saw last week that even the Kansas City Chiefs had to keep their foot on the gas pedal and have Patrick Mahomes actually air it out a little bit to hang on to that narrow victory over the Panthers. This is a great recipe for success because the Panthers still aren't really a great team. Their defense is giving up points, but the offense can actually keep the game somewhat competitive now if they can keep things going. Mike Evans at wide receiver is another week back from his hamstring injury, and the quarterback 4 on the season in Baker Mayfield is in a great position this week. He is a mid quarterback 1 play in week 13. We are also going to quickly go over my quarterback starts of the week from last week, just to kind of shout out, because I think it's important that we just at least touch on what we've done in the past to see, you know, how well we're doing. So last week, my quarterback starts of the week were Bo Nix of the Broncos and Justin Herbert of the Chargers. Bo Nix was the quarterback 7 last week in week 12. I'm using Fantasy Pro scoring, by the way. So that was a solid call. And then Justin Herbert was the quarterback 12 on the week. So I was hoping for more from him, but still a QB1. And we're going to talk about Bo Nix in a little bit. Shockingly not in the quarterback section. But moving on to the running back position, my running back start of the week is Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers at home versus the Tampa Bay Bucks. Same game I just talked about, right? Got that 46.5 point over under. Chuba Hubbard has been dominant all season long. He's a running back 13 in points per game. One of the steals in all of fantasy football drafts. Rookie running back Jonathan Brooks made his debut last week, and he saw just 2 touches. Meanwhile, Chuba Hubbard had 16 carries and 5 targets in that game against the Chiefs, who give up the fewest points to running backs in all of fantasy football. Chuba still had a great game. He scored 14.5 fantasy points in half PPR. He is the clear lead back. The Panthers offense has looked pretty decent lately, and frankly, he's just a good player who almost always finds a way to get it done, regardless of the matchup or his supporting cast around him. Now, in week 13, he gets to take on the Tampa Bay Bucks, who give up the 9th most points per game to running backs on the season. He is a solid mid running back 2 play in week 13. Last week, our running back starts of the week were Brian Robinson. I don't really want to talk about this, but he did get hurt in that game. So he had 2.9 points, running back 43, and then he left with an injury. So, I'll take a minor L on that, but you can't really predict injury. And then Kareem Hunt was my other one who was a bit disappointing. 10.2 points in half PPR. He was running back 18 on the week. So it could have been worse, but I was hoping for a bigger performance. But, you'll still take that. We're going to move on to the wide receiver position here. And oh my goodness, guys, this is a player who I love. I had him in Dynasty, and I long ago, I really believed in this guy, and he didn't really pan out for fantasy. And I got to a point in my Dynasty league where I was kind of trying to trade him away for pretty much anything of value, and nobody wanted him at all. It would be like, bro, why are you even sending me this trade? I don't want this guy. Just a waste of a roster spot. And now he might be a league winner. And that is Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos at home versus the Cleveland Browns. Before the 2024 season, Courtland Sutton had a pretty disappointing career in comparison to the expectations that we had for him. But rookie quarterback Bo Nix has stepped in, and for the first time in his career, he's given Courtland Sutton a viable passer who can actually get him the ball. Bo Nix is a solid quarterback start this week, and frankly, most weeks at this point, especially with the remaining schedule for the Broncos passing game to finish the season. They might be league winners, but I just want to highlight Courtland Sutton in this matchup against Cleveland. Courtland Sutton is the wide receiver 8 in total points on the season, and get this, since getting goosed in prime time in week 7 where he had 0 points, from week 8 on, Sutton is the wide receiver 2 in fantasy. Not a wide receiver 2, the wide receiver 2 overall, behind only a guy named Jamar Chase. Not only has he been playing great, but now he takes on the Cleveland Browns. They give up the 5th most points per game to wide receivers on the season. It's a great matchup. Courtland Sutton is a borderline must start at this point, and he is a low wide receiver 1 play in week 13. Last week, in week 12, I just kind of highlighted the Chargers passing game to stack with Justin Herbert. So Ladd McConkey finished with, he finished all right with 11.3, wide receiver 22 on the week. We'll take that. But Quentin Johnson got goosed. He had targets. He had a few targets, just some terrible drops. I don't think he was going to have a huge game, but, he would have had a few catches if he could just, hold on to the ball. But anyways, I digress. We're going to move on to the tight end position. So my tight end start of the week is Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints at home versus the LA Rams. This game has a 49-point over-under. The last time we saw Taysom Hill play in week 11, he scored nearly 40 fantasy points against the Browns. Now, I do not think he will be putting up that type of production again, but the fact is that he is one of the few tight ends, if not the only one in the entire NFL, who is even capable of putting up such a monstrous performance. And he seems to have a game like that or two every season. He is not only utilized in the passing game, but he is also used on the ground, and he is a red zone threat to score touchdowns. On top of that, he even throws passes from time to time. He's the ultimate Swiss Army knife. He had 7 for 138 and 3 touchdowns on the ground in that monster performance a couple weeks ago. So he's not a traditional tight end by any means. In week 13, the Saints get to take on the Rams, a defense that really doesn't scare me, and they just got trounced by the Eagles last week. You can't really use tight end metrics for Taysom Hill, but, last week was the game where they allowed Saquon Barkley to run for 250 yards. It was insane. This all comes down to utilization, and Taysom Hill is being used in a way that no other tight end in the league, frankly, is being used. He might not be great every week, but I'm starting Taysom Hill and his upside over a guy who might get me like 8 points on a good day. Taysom Hill is a mid tight end 1 play in week 13 with a ton of upside. Last week for tight ends, We went with Will Dissly, so I really targeted that Chargers passing attack. 6.7 points, tight end, 17 on the week. Not great. Goddard was a huge disappointment. 3.9 points. Still the tight end 22 on the week. I mean, that's bad, but 3.9 being in the top 24 is kind of crazy. God, tight end is so gross. And then Hunter Henry, he was actually a solid play. He had 6.9 points, but the touchdown went to Austin Hooper, his fellow tight end mate. So those are my starts of the week for week 13. I'll also do a quick little defensive overview before we finish off the segment. So Kansas City Chiefs at home versus the Raiders is a smash play. Looks like Aiden O'Connell is going to get the start at QB with Gardner Minshew out for the season with that collarbone injury. It was collarbone. Or was it clavicle? Something like that. Is that the same thing? No. Collarbone versus clavicle. The collarbone and the clavicle are the same bone. Literally the first words that I read. So, okay. Interesting. Huh. Okay. I learned something new. Hopefully you did too. Maybe people know that. I don't know. Other than that, Broncos at home versus Cleveland. Great matchup. On top of that, the Broncos are a tremendous defense in general, but they're taking on the Browns, who they can score points, but Jameis Winston at quarterback, he's a little turnover prone. He's probably going to throw at least 1 or 2 interceptions in that game. So that's a good matchup. After that, Houston against Jacksonville, who looks just terrible. So far, I mean, their offense just can do nothing. I don't know what's going on with them. Trevor Lawrence, the latest report I see is that Trevor Lawrence will practice on Wednesday. It got posted 6 hours ago. So if Trevor Lawrence plays, that obviously helps the Jaguars offense, but I still think that, you know, the Texans DST is a good play, and I think it's going to be a game where Joe Mixon just dominates on the ground. You know, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about CJ Stroud as a good start, which, you know, it's a great matchup for quarterbacks, but Stroud just has not been getting it done, and a lot of that is because Joe Mixon has just started and finished games for this offense. I see no reason why Joe Mixon couldn't do that again. So, you know, little shout out to CJ Stroud as a minor like sleeper candidate, but I could definitely see that just being a Joe Mixon game and a defensive game. After that, who do we have here? I mean, Detroit versus Chicago. I mean, that's all right. The Bears looked really good last week against my Vikings on offense, but they're a little up and down. Commanders defense has been playing better. They get Tennessee and Will Levis, so you could do that. The Vikings take on Arizona. You never know what offense is going to show up for the Cardinals, so that's not bad. The Bucks on the road in Carolina. I mean, the Panthers offense has been playing better, and the Bucks give up a ton of passing production, so wouldn't be surprised if the Bucks actually kind of disappoint in that spot, but they are still an okay play just based on, you know, who's available just based on the matchups this week and who's available. Plus, I mean, Bryce Young could be like a nice DFS play. He might carve him up a little bit, you know, for Bryce Young standards at least. And then, you know, you got the Cowboys and the Giants game. That's probably going to be gross. So you can play the Cowboys against Drew Lock, I believe, is going to get the start last I heard. Yeah. So honestly, the defenses aren't super great this week. Like, it's the Chiefs, Broncos, and Texans. Well, Chiefs and Broncos that I really love. Then you have the Texans at Jacksonville in the next tier, and then I think you have like the Lions against the Bears and the Commanders against the Titans in the next tier, and then after that, you know, there's a lot of parallels. So hopefully you have one of those top plays. And that's going to do it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed. Please make sure to drop a like if you can, like, wherever you're enjoying the podcast. Leave a comment if you can do that. And make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening so that you can stay tuned for the next episode and become a fantasy football prodigy. Good luck to everyone except our opponents in week 13. And have a merry Thanksgiving. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.